featuring candidates running to be Utah's next governor. I'm Jason Perry, director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics at the University of Utah. It is my pleasure to be moderating tonight's exchange, sponsored by the Utah Debate Commission, an organization dedicated to educating voters and encouraging the civil exchange of ideas. The candidates invited to speak here tonight are Spencer Cox, Brian King, and J. Robert Latham. If you are watching or listening live, you are welcome to send your reactions and questions on social media to hashtag #UTDebates. The format for this debate is as follows. Each candidate will have a predetermined time to respond to the questions, and on occasion, there will be rebuttal time. A random drawing held prior to this debate determined that candidate King will get the initial response to the first question. We will then alternate
graduated from Olympus High School, became a lawyer, and used that opportunity to represent folks who are the least among us, people accused of crime, families responding to a DCFS petition. And it is through that experience that I see the state of Utah abusing the people of Utah. And so what I hope to do as a governor is use my experience by those who really don't get a fair shake from our state government, a better shake. And I can do that best by being their liberator.
Thank you. Mr. Cox, same question.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's been an honor of a lifetime to serve as your governor over the past 4 years. We've accomplished so much together. I still can't believe they let a kid from Sanpete County be in this place, and I'm so honored to have served with you. Let's talk about what we've done together over the past 4 years. The largest tax cut in our state's history, over $1.3 billion. Despite my Democratic colleague voting against it. We passed the largest teacher raises in our state's history, despite my Democratic colleague voting against it. We also empowered parents against social media companies leading the nation, those companies who are taking advantage of our kids and destroying their mental health and their lives, and we did that together. We have paid down debt faster than any administration in history and kept our AAA bond rating. Utah is a special place. We have to keep Utah strong. And it's those conservative values that have kept us that way. There are others that want us to follow places like California. We will not do that. We will keep Utah strong.
Okay, thank you. I want to jump right into the next topic, which will be about polarization. Mr. Latham, you're going to get this first question. Exactly 23 years ago, our nation was united in the aftermath of the tragic September 11th attacks. Today, we seem to be facing ever-increasing polarization. Through that lens, what are your thoughts on the presidential debate last night, and how do you believe leaders at both the state and national level can foster more constructive dialogue and maybe even some unity?
Not mean compromising our principles or our values. We must always stay true to those principles and values, but we can do better. We don't have to hate each other. I do not hate my colleagues up here tonight as we debate each other. This should be a debate about ideas, not about attacking character.
Thank you. Mr. King, same question on polarization.
Thank you. You know, we have to step back when we talk about polarization and think about our Utah values. We here in Utah do believe in disagreeing respectably and respectfully and listening to other people, caring about them. And one of the things that's remarkable to me is that our current governor, for years, went ahead and said openly, I thought commendably, that he was not going to support Donald Trump. And then we see 2 months ago a flip. And this is the individual that the governor endorsed. He endorsed a man who openly brags of sexually assaulting women. He endorses a man who tried to overthrow our constitutional republic. This is the worst example we've seen on the stage of American politics in our lifetimes. We need to talk the talk. We need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And the governor right now is simply acting inconsistently with his statements that he wants to disagree better.
We'll take a moment and give a rebuttal to
thank you.
First, Governor Cox.
Thanks for letting me respond to that. Ladies and gentlemen, when the former president was nearly assassinated, I reached out to him and encouraged him to disagree better. Now, I don't pretend that I'm important enough for him to care about what I think at all. But what I have done is dedicated my life to depolarizing our country. And I'm going to do everything I can to help him, to help my party, to help Democrats, to help us come together. And I'm committed to that. It's sad to me that my colleague would dismiss the vast majority of voters in our state who are going to support the former president. But I'm going to do everything I can to help him and everybody else come together and treat each other with respect.
Your time. Mr. King, your response for 30 seconds.
Yes, thank you. You know, the governor talks about unifying and getting behind someone, but we need to stand up for the examples that are good for our children, to be a proper example himself in terms of what it means to disagree better. When you're talking about supporting an individual who has shown repeatedly so little regard for individuals who are talking in this political spectrum where we're trying to disagree better, the words, again, ring hollow. It's hard to say that he's trying to unify people behind someone as poor an example as Donald Trump.
Mr. Latham, 30 seconds if you have a response.
Well, again, what I heard is just kind of the gaslighting that we've been used to, again, the Utahns that are excluded from this conversation. And again, that's responsible for why I'm on this stage, because so many don't feel like their views fit into the two-party duopoly. And so what I want to hear from incumbent politicians is, how do you intend to include all Utahns, women, underrepresented minorities in our state government, so that we have a government that reflects all of Utah, not just some of Utah?
Thank you. I want to move on to some other topics here. First, about, I guess I'll put in the category of economic development and growth. Utah has consistently been one of the fastest growing states in the nation, and this trend is expected to continue. As a result, several issues are becoming increasingly important and facing mounting pressure. I'd like to talk about a couple of those. The first is the economy itself. Many Utahns are concerned about the state of the economy, particularly about rising costs and their ability to afford the essentials of life. As governor, what specific steps will you take to address these concerns and strengthen Utah's economy? Mr. Cox, you get the first.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very fortunate that I get to tell you what we are doing and have done. I'm proud that Utah has led the nation over my tenure as governor over the past 4 years in economic growth. It is incredible what is happening here. This is the golden age of Utah. And yes, there are some growth challenges that we face. We welcome people. I've always said I'd love to build a wall around Utah and make California pay for it, but that's not how this works. And so when people come here, I'm grateful that you're here, and I want to remind you not to turn us into where you came from. Sadly, so much of the inflation that we are facing is because of a federal government and the current administration that is spending money out of control. The same type of spending that my Democratic colleagues here are supportive of. We have to stop that type of wasteful spending coming out of Washington, D.C. And I hope we get to this, we're going to build 35,000 starter homes in Utah over the next 5 years to reduce the cost of housing. And we're going to double energy production in our state over the next 4 years so that we can make sure that we're reducing the cost of energy in our state.
Mr. King, your response on the economy.
Thank you. You know, I hear the governor talk about being #1 in the country, but statistics aren't everything. And for people who are struggling, they don't mean anything. As we travel around the state from Tokerville to Tremont, and we find people saying the same thing to us. If we're the best economy in the country, why do I find such a hard time making ends meet? Here's the commitment that I'm making to people of the state of Utah. My first priority is to make sure that on the first day of the King administration, we're looking out for everyday Utahns, middle class, working Utahns who are struggling to make ends meet. We do not want to have families who have to work a second or a third job simply to provide Christmas for their children. That's something that this administration is not focused on to the degree that they need to be. Looking after working class, middle class Utahns, taking care of our children, taking care of the people who are struggling to make ends meet the most.
Thank you. Mr. Latham, your response.
And Jason, as someone who represented real estate professionals in Utah many years ago, I am familiar with just the issues pertaining to the right to use and transfer and occupy property. And I've been so disappointed in what I've seen coming out of the legislature and then signed off by the governor, what I consider crony developer capitalism. And these bills that have recently been passed where there's a $20,000 or some subsidy to buy a new home, well, guess what? Now the price of housing is 20% higher. That's just basic economics. We should reject that kind of approach. What I like is what's called the Free to Build initiative, sponsored by the Libertas Institute, where it grows our housing stock and that increases housing affordability rather than direct taxpayer funds that unjustly enrich developers and doesn't make housing more attainable.
Thank you very much. I want to turn to the next big category, which is energy. The demand for reliable and sustainable energy is becoming more urgent and has become a barrier to growth for the state of Utah. In this context, what energy production management policies would you pursue as governor to ensure affordable and sustainable power? The first question is to you, Mr. King.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that it's funny to me that I'm a Democrat lecturing my Republican colleagues and the governor about the need to follow the free market. We've got renewable energy resources in Utah that are tremendous. Solar, wind, water power, hydro. And those are things that we are neglecting because we refuse to follow where the market is taking us. That's where the market is taking us. Renewable energy is not the future. It's the present knocking on our door saying, why are you late? That's what we're doing in Utah. We are not picking the ball up and running with this in a way that honors free market principles and, quite honestly, that is going to move more seamlessly and without difficulty and pain communities that right now are relying on those non-renewable resources. We can do a much better job of cleaning up our air and our water and making sure that we contribute to a better planet to live in for our children and our grandchildren if we focus on and if we grasp renewable.
Mr. Latham, on energy.
I consider myself an all-of-the-above energy proponent. I would add to that mix nuclear. Many liberty-minded folks are very enthusiastic about thorium reactors. That might be a safe way to add to our energy mix. Utah has an unfortunate history of allowing energy producers to then pollute our state and then leave taxpayers cleaning up after that. So we want to make sure that when we authorize energy producers to make sure the lights come on and our computers work, that they don't do so in a way that, again, despoils our environment, because that's the reason why a lot of us live here in Utah, is its natural beauty. And so I want to make sure that, you know, we're not granting any favors to someone who's not going to return that favor to us.
Thank you. Mr. Cox, on energy.
Yeah, thank you. Let me assure you there are 103 legislators laughing around right now at the idea that Representative King is lecturing on the free market. Let me assure you that we are doing nothing in Utah to stop the free market when it comes to energy production. We want all of the above. Mr. Latham is absolutely right. We are an all of the above state, and we are growing our renewables faster than many states. But you know why we can't grow our renewables faster? Because of the left and the radical environmental movement that won't allow permitting reform. Most of our state are public lands. We can't even build the very types of things that he's arguing we should build because, again, the radical environmental movement and the Democrats in Congress will not pass permitting reform to make that possible. But we have to have nuclear. If you believe in decarbonizing and reducing the price of energy in our country, you have to support nuclear. And we are doing everything we can. Again, sadly, we have an administration and a federal government that's making it harder and harder all of the time to do those types of projects, but Utah is leading the way, an all of the above approach.
If I could respond to that.
A 30-second rebuttal.
Thank you. You know, it's just not accurate to say that the market is dictating that we keep our coal-powered plants open. In fact, Rocky Mountain Power has made clear they're raising our rates in part because we insist at the legislature and the governor in keeping those coal-powered plants open despite the fact that they are at increased cost and they're passing those costs on to consumers of the state of Utah. This is not what the free market dictates. Free market suggests that we much more aggressively embrace the future.
So that is simply not true. You can talk to Rocky Mountain Power. They are keeping their coal plants open because they can't get nuclear permitted in time before when they were planning to close those coal plants. This idea of removing energy production in our state before we are ready for a transition will quadruple the price of energy in our state. That has nothing to do with the increases that are happening. What is happening right now is we do not have enough electricity production, and people like Representative King want to stop that production from happening. It's insane. There is no common sense on the left when it comes to energy production. We are going to double energy production in the state of Utah over the next 10 years.
Mr. Latham, you get the final word on energy.
Jason, if I can just add to this, we actually, speaking of coal, that's another unfortunate example of crony capitalism in Utah. The Utah legislature allocated millions of dollars to do this Alameda station, and this was, you know, just a gift to central Utah legislators who are in coal country. That was not fair to the rest of Utahns who are trying to make ends meet, and it's a polluting technology, and we shouldn't be subsidizing it.
Okay. Mr. Latham, you're going to get the next question. The broad category is transportation. Utah's rapid population growth is putting a strain on our transportation infrastructure, and many residents are concerned about congestion, commute times, and access to efficient transportation. What are your plans to expand and improve transportation options in the state of Utah?
Okay. Well, I think this is a good opportunity to talk about the reality of the political environment in Utah were a Libertarian to be elected governor. We have legislators, 29 in the Senate, 75 in the House. Probably only a handful, if any, are going to be Libertarian. Now, maybe half of those are liberty-minded. There are actually, I think, a good number of legislators up there who I think I could work with on a pretty good basis. So on transportation, I would listen to legislators because they're studying these issues. They're attending the committee hearings. I would listen to their guidance on what they have to do. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it has to make sense for the average Utah commuter and person who uses transit and commutes to work every day. So I'd want to listen to them. But I'm worried about federal subsidies, creating perverse incentives. And, of course, I'm worried about crony capitalism and giving money to the folks who do these transportation systems.
Mr. Cox?
Yeah, thank you. And I will get to that. I want to just very quickly give a shout out to my friends, my people in coal country. There are people out there who have dedicated their lives to giving us the cheapest, most reliable energy in the country, and they deserve the credit for what they've done. This dismissiveness that I'm hearing from people who have raised their families living in coal country is very disturbing to me, and I just want them to know how much we care about them. Look, we have an incredible opportunity over the next 10 years. The Olympics are coming back to Utah in 2034. This is an opportunity for all of us, and I've been meeting with every mayor, every city council member, every county commissioner in this state and talking about the opportunities that we have right now. We are so fortunate to have a Department of Transportation that is recognized not across just the United States but across the world, and we have to increase transit. We're going to do that over the next 10 years. We have the largest trails program in the country happening right now in our administration. We want to connect every community in Utah via trail. So you can walk, you can bike, you can find other ways to get around. And last thing, we're going to go vertical. We're going to go vertical over the next 10 years. Talk about the Jetsons. It's going to look a little bit like that, but we'll get there.
Thank you. Mr. King.
Thank you. There's a lot that we can do in transportation. We're moving forward. When the Olympics came in 2002, we did a lot in terms of infrastructure for the freeway and tracks and front runner. That was all positive. With the Olympics coming back, we do have an opportunity to make some real gains here. The federal government is going to want to say to us, let's make sure that those Olympics in 2034 are well put on. That means that we have a chance to do transit projects that we wouldn't be able to do necessarily without that. We need to do more transit-oriented development. We need to make sure that people can live and work and stay in their own communities rather than having to commute 30 or 45 minutes in their cars. That's wasteful of their time and energy. It's dirty, of course, in terms of what it does to our air. And we can do a better job of making sure that our local communities benefit from how carefully we plan our transportation in a way that improves the quality of life and benefits families. So there's a lot that we can do there. As your governor, I look forward to being able to work with cities, towns, counties, and of course the Department of Transportation.
Our last topic in this category, we've alluded to a little bit, but it's housing. Housing in the state of Utah. It's a concern for many of our residents who are looking for solutions. How would you address the challenge of increasing affordable housing options across the state to ensure more Utahns can find homes they can afford?
Yeah, and again, we have touched on this, and I'm excited to touch on it again because it was my #1 priority going into the legislature last session. We have to build. It is the only answer. Sadly, over the past 15 years, we've stopped building starter homes, homes that are under $400,000, homes that are under $300,000. And so we sat down with experts. We worked with everybody, the League of Cities and Towns, our county commissioners, working with developers, everyone in this space to figure out what we could do. And we have come up with a plan, again, to build 35,000 starter homes over the next 5 years, homes that our kids and grandkids can afford. I shudder to think what our country will be like if we have a generation of people who can't afford real property. Every governor is struggling with this. Every developed nation is struggling with this. This is not just a Utah problem, but we are going to have Utah solutions. Look, I love my kids just like all of you. I want my kids to live near me. I do not want my kids to live with me. And that is what we are going to do, working together. We have a plan. We have legislation. It's moving forward. We just had the first 250 homes approved, and we're moving.
Mr. King, your response.
Thank you. we do want to make sure that our children and grandchildren don't come to us and say, you know, I'd love to stay in Utah, but I can't do it. I can't afford a home. If we're the best economy in the country, why is it that so many people have such difficulty getting into a home? That's something that can change. It has to change. We've done some good things. I'll agree with that. But there's so much more that we need to do, because right now, the average home cost is over $500,000. And that is simply unaffordable for individuals who have just gotten out of school and are trying to get into their first home. One of the things we can do is provide greater disincentives for people who do not live in Utah to not purchase homes as speculative or investment properties. They have no intention of living there many times. They just want to either flip them for speculation purposes, or they want to rent them out at inflated rents. And that's not good for Utahns. We need to make sure that Utah housing stock is purchased and available for Utahns.
Same question, Mr. Latham.
And Jason, just to build upon my earlier answer about the Free to Build program, I really encourage folks interested in this issue to look at the freetobuild.org website. It has, I think, some great market-oriented solutions that can, again, increase housing affordability in Utah. And look, one of the issues about the Utah legislature is it is composed of a large number of developers. And one way developers make their money is to reduce the supply. And when you reduce the supply, when you have this construction cartel, that raises the cost of housing for the housing consumer, but it makes it certainly more profitable for the developer. And I'm a free market, liberty-minded person who's not going to really put up with that kind of approach. So, yeah, maybe they might overrule my veto if they want to do another thing like they just did with the past bill and give themselves a subsidy and increase their bottom line. That's something that would happen over my veto.
Okay. I'm so happy that we have a student question. This is Cassidy Archuleta. She's a student at Salt Lake Community College, and her question is about Amendment D.
Hi. As a student, I'd like to welcome you guys to our campus. Thank you for being here tonight. This fall, we will see the constitutional amendment regarding legislatures' ability to repeal and modify citizen ballot initiatives. My question to you is, should legislature have that power?
Mr. King, you get the first response.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cassidy.
When legislatures with great power say to people, we, the legislature, need more power, and it needs to come from you, the people of the state of Utah, the answer to that question is really simple and straightforward, and it's a hard no. This is nothing but a power grab that we're dealing with in Amendment D. It's a situation where the legislature was very unhappy with the Supreme Court, the Utah State Supreme Court ruling in July, where the Utah Supreme Court said the people of the state of Utah, through their initiative and referendum processes, share power to make law with the legislature. That wasn't good enough for legislative leaders. And they came along and they said, no, we want to put an amendment on the about the state constitution on the ballot and gaslight people and deceive people into voting for it when they're telling us it accomplishes something that it really doesn't. This is deceptive, it's deceitful, and it is something that every Utahn should come out to the polls in November and vote against.
Mr. Latham, your response.
I'll be voting no on Constitutional Amendment D. That's assuming, of course, it gets onto the ballot. There was a legal challenge. I know it was heard in court this afternoon. I don't know where that's going to go, but Representative King is right. The language that President Stuart Adams and Speaker Mike Schultz put on there is deceitful. A good lesson in how initiatives have played out in Utah. Recall Initiative B from the year 2000. This was the civil asset forfeiture. It was passed by 69% of Utah voters. And then law enforcement was upset with it. They lobbied over years to get the legislature to trim it back and trim it back. Now, thankfully, through many years, we have those civil asset forfeiture protections restored. But Amendment D is so offensive because it only applies to altering and reforming government, and something like Initiative B is not that, and the legislature showed that they can address those kind of things that are passed by the people.
Mr. Cox. And then
Yeah,
indeed.
Cassidy, thank you for the question. This is one that a lot of people in the state of Utah are struggling with right now. There's a reason that the Founding Fathers did not put direct democracy as part of our national constitution, but we do have it in our state constitution. And it's very important that we have the opportunity as people to propose initiatives and referenda as well to overturn a decision by the legislature. I will tell you the best states in this country, all ranked, have less initiatives, not more. Initiatives should be rare, but they are important, and we have to keep that power available. I'm very glad to hear that Representative King is opposed to expanding the power of the legislature. What most people don't know is the governor doesn't have an opportunity to weigh in on constitutional amendments. That's totally the purview of the legislature. But a couple years ago, there was a power grab by the legislature, and that was when the legislature expanded their power to call themselves into special session. Unfortunately, Representative King supported that. I think he may be lamenting that a little bit right now, but sadly that's outside the purview of the governor right now.
Jason.
30 seconds on this topic.
Thank you. The governor is deceiving you in the same way that the legislature is. He signed 2 bills coming out of the special session 3 weeks ago that enabled this constitutional amendment to get on the ballot in November. He doesn't want to talk about that. He's complicit with the legislature in this power grab. And that's not unusual. He's a lapdog for the most extreme and the most divisive voices in the legislature.
Okay.
Jason,
Mr. Latham and then Mr. Cox.
I'll also just direct voters to my Twitter account, where I post the friend of the court brief that the governor submitted to the Utah Supreme Court, asking them to side with the Utah legislature against the League of Women Voters in supporting that amendment. So he's already displayed that he is with the people who have put this very deceitful constitutional amendment forward.
I want to be very clear here. What my colleague just accused me of is trying to keep the people from voting on this amendment. That's as anti-people as anything we've heard up here. The people should have this choice. And if you don't support it, then vote no. But trying to keep the people from voting on it, I think is incredibly deceitful.
Okay, we're going to change topics here for a moment. We're going to talk about education. Mr. Latham, this will be you addressing this issue first. Utah's Constitution currently requires income tax revenue to be used for K through 12 education, higher education, or services for children and individuals with disabilities. This fall, Utahns will be voting on a constitutional amendment that would expand the uses of income tax to include other state needs. Please explain why you would support or oppose this amendment. To you, Mr. Latham.
If it's the one I'm thinking of, Constitutional Amendment A, that's supposed to decouple the income tax from education, but let it be used for other purposes. I know there's disagreement among liberty-minded Utahns about this amendment. I currently support it. I, as a libertarian, support the separation of school and state. I think that market-based education just delivers a better product for children and their families. And I get that it goes to possibly budgets that you oversee as a University of Utah administrator. But I think we need to move away from state-sponsored education just because they affect the curriculum. I mean, we have a law in Utah that teaches young people about adoption and all the trauma that causes, and they're just being indoctrinated rather than educated.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, to you, Mr. Cox.
Yeah, thank you. This amendment does something else as well. It removes the state portion of the sales tax on food. It's one of the ways that we are fighting against the federal government and the inflation that we're seeing. I fully support removing that tax on food and expanding what we can spend income tax on. Look, this happens every year. The legislature ultimately decides and then passes that on to the governor, a budget. I am so proud of what we've been able to do for education. I made a promise to the people of Utah that I would increase teacher salaries in this state, and we were able to get that done. I was told we would have to give the money to school districts and let them distribute it, and I said absolutely not. We are giving this money directly to teachers. Now, there was a report that recently came out from the University of Utah, and it said that Utah now has the second highest starting salaries in the country. Another publication said we're top 10. That is incredible and unbelievable. Just 4 years ago, people never thought we could get up to number 2. Now, we still have a long ways to go, but we can do both of these things. We can reduce the sales tax on food, and we can continue to fund education and increase funding for education in our state.
Thank you. Mr. King.
Thank you. Amendment A changes the language of the state constitution, which provides a guaranteed funding source through income tax for our public schools. That is something that's solid. It can be counted on. Now, we're being asked to trade that for pure legislative power about how our public neighborhood schools get funded. That's not a trade I'm willing to make, because I see how the legislature changes from year to year. There are a lot of public or political winds that move through the legislative system. What our public education system needs is a stable, guaranteed source of income. We have that in a dedicated stream through the income tax revenue for the state of Utah. That benefits teachers, it benefits children, it benefits the future of the state. Why don't we get out of the classroom at the legislature and let our professional teachers do what they do best, teach our children? That's what we really need to do, and provide them with a stable funding source.
Mm-hmm. I want to continue on this theme of the powers of the governor. The Utah legislative branch has grown increasingly influential in recent years. As governor, how would you navigate this dynamic to maintain a balance of power that allows for collaboration between the executive and the legislative branches? For you first, Governor.
Yeah, I wish everybody could see the collaboration that happens behind the scenes at the legislature. We work very closely with legislative leadership, and I'm grateful for the relationship that we have. Navigating 104 legislators is incredibly difficult. Those 45 days through January through March, every year as we come together. I always tell people to judge the legislature by the bills that get passed and signed. And what I can tell you, we can stand up here, and I'm sure we'll hear that we should veto more bills. Vetoing bills is a very ineffective way to run a state, although it is important and we do it often. The best negotiation happens behind the scenes. There are dozens and dozens of bills that don't get passed every year because of the work that we're doing, and dozens of bills that get changed in a better way. It really is about relationships and making that happen, and we have the best relationship that I've seen in decades with our state legislature.
Mr. King.
Thank you. I've served the legislature for 16 years. The entire time, we've had a monopoly of power with one party, and that is a bad thing. Monopolies of power in the political context are not any better than monopolies in our economy, and nobody wants to have to deal with the problems associated with monopolies in our economy. I'm a free market guy. I'm a small business owner. I believe that we are best served when we have competition from as many different ideas as we can. We simply don't have that in the legislature today. And we especially don't have it when we have a governor who is simply willing to sign anything that crosses his desk, no matter how terrible, no matter how unnecessary, no matter how divisive. And we've seen far too much of that. So what we need is to have bipartisanship. Here's the promise you'll have with me as the governor. Every bill I sign will be a bipartisan bill. And that's not something that the governor can say.
Mr. Latham.
And bipartisanship means that excludes me, it excludes all of us in Utah who don't cheer for the red or the blue team. And so that's why my campaign is focusing on underthrowing the government, choosing your own path through intentional communities, mutual aid societies, even what are called FOCJs, functionally overlapping competing jurisdictions. These are competing governments rather than monopoly governments. And by taking the bully pulpit and advocating for these kind of decentralizing solutions. In fact, in the Libertarian movement, we have something called Project Decentralized Revolution, which I hope people will take a look at. And that's about returning power back from these monopolizing political interests and back to the people. But I've worked at the legislature. I've been on Capitol Hill for 10 or so years. I know how to work with legislators and get good bills passed and defeat bad bills.
Very good. We're fortunate to have another student question. This is Ben Amundsen, a student at the University of Utah. He has a question about artificial intelligence.
Candidates, I personally witnessed how AI has changed education in our state for both students and teachers. How do you plan to address the expansion of AI in our state, balancing job protection with privacy concerns?
Mr. King, you get the first response.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. It's a great question. Technology in some ways is outrunning our ability to keep our lives private. It's amazing to me the degree to which I will go online and look at something, shop on something, and then immediately I'll have emails saying, hey, we saw you were looking at this. And it troubles me. We've got to make sure that private industry, with their profit motive and with their effort at no costs, at all costs, to make sure that they increase their profits. We've got to make sure that our children are protected. We've got to make sure that our privacy is protected. We can't just sell these things off to the highest bidder. And I think we failed and we've fallen behind in that sense. There's room for improvement here. There's a lot we can do. A lot of it has to do with working closely with people who really understand these technologies far beyond my pay scale, but that's something that would have the highest priority in the King administration.
Mr. Latham.
With regards to artificial intelligence, I'm reminded, I'm probably going to paraphrase this idea from economist Thomas Sowell, that there's really no idea more stupid and counterproductive than giving decision-making authority to someone who doesn't pay any price for being wrong. And if we put government in charge of regulating AI, if they have that power to ban it, they have just as much power to mandate it. And so the last entity I want to put in charge of controlling what role AI plays in our life is a government that can't even, get the mail delivered on time and protect drugs from entering the prisons and any number of episodes of government failure that we expect them to discharge with fidelity. I would rather see the market protect us from the things in our lives we're concerned about than ever authorizing government to do that.
Final response, Mr. Cox.
Yeah, Ben, thank you. Great question and really important. Once again, Utah is leading the nation when it comes to the most innovative solutions. We've been working very closely over the past year, something that my administration proposed and worked with some incredible legislators on, to create an AI policy lab. This is where we are bringing professionals together. We're bringing companies in. We're bringing the smartest people in the AI world together, and we're working on solutions together. This has been at the request of these companies because they are worried about the unintended consequences of AI, but they're also worried about government overreach and not allowing the technology to flourish. And so we're working very closely in this policy lab together to figure out what the best practices are and what the best policy and regulatory pieces are. I will just note that I am deeply concerned about the future with our children. This idea of privacy. We have handed over our privacy to these giant companies, many of them monopolies in this space. We have to turn that back. We have to increase, and we have to empower parents, increase privacy for our students, for our kids, and get those big companies out of our homes, our bedrooms, and out of our wallets.
Thank you. This next question is about one of the most important powers that you have as governor, and this is dealing with judges. It's a discussion that's happening around the country and certainly here in the state of Utah about how judges are nominated and retained. Since this will be one of your responsibilities as governor, is nominating these judges, what would be the most important quality you would prioritize in your judicial nominations? Mr. Latham.
Well, thank you. And I'll just indicate that when I was a law student up at the University of Utah, I was the chapter president for the Federal Society for Law and Public Policy Studies. I was later, as a lawyer, the Salt Lake City chapter president of that. Now, the Federal Society gets a bad rap by a lot of folks, but it speaks to both conservative and libertarians who feel excluded from the legal academy, from most law schools, from having their voices heard. And so I've actually been thrilled with some of the recent federal appointees. And on the U.S. Supreme Court, I think Dobbs was correctly decided, but now it's turning that decision back to the states, and that's where we need to have the battle over that kind of state issue. But I was incredibly disappointed. I even wrote to the governor about a nominee, Angela Adams, to the juvenile court in the 5th District. You can go to my website, childtrafficking.exposed, and get the history about that. But that was, I think, showed very poor judgment in appointing judges.
Governor Cox.
This is one of the most important things that I get to do is to appoint judges, and it's something that I take very seriously. I just interviewed this week several candidates for a judgeship. Now the question was, what is the most important thing that I look for in judges? And the most important thing I look for is their judicial philosophy and making sure they will not be activist judges. The role of a judge is very simple. It is to take the law as passed by the legislature and the governor and to apply that law to the facts. Judges are not supposed to make law. Judges are not supposed to decide what they want the result to be and then figure out a way to get there. That is what activism is. It's what is happening in far too many places in our country. And I'm proud of the judges here. They're not all perfect. They don't all get it right, but we have done a tremendous job. I think we have the best system in the nation for choosing our judges. With Senate consent, they get an opportunity to talk to these judges, review what they're doing, and then we, the people, after they've been chosen, get an opportunity to decide if we're going to retain them. And I'm grateful that we have fewer activist judges here in the state of Utah.
I want to tackle one question. We're kind of running out of time, so we're not going to get a full minute about. Sorry, Mr. King. Give your response, and then you can take the next question also.
I do want to address this.
I think you get a chance to address it. By the way, you have 3 attorneys up here, which is a huge mistake, but I'm the only recovering attorney.
We've got 4, actually.
I appreciate the chance to respond because I do care very much about our state judiciary. You know, Utah State Judiciary is one that is admired the most across the entire country. And one of the reasons I changed my mind about the direction that our particular governor was headed was that in 2023, he supported a bill to change the judicial nominating committee selection process to make it so that rather than having judges and lawyers and even lay people send to him names of potential judges, he is the one who gets to choose who is vetting those names and deciding on what names will be sent to him. We moved our judicial nominating process into the direction of partisanship in a way that is extraordinarily damaging and has the potential to take us down a more partisan road for how our judges are selected. You ask how I select judges? They have to be nonpartisan. We don't want them political. We want them to follow the law. We want to have them be great attorneys. That's something that we've lost ground on under this governor.
Okay, we're going to do some rebuttal, 30 seconds, and this is going to be the end of the normal questioning.
Thank you. I just want to be very clear. Yeah, we did change the judicial nominating, but the Constitution has not changed. And I am prohibited by law from choosing judges based on partisanship. And that will never change. I hope that doesn't change. I think it is very important, and I take that very seriously.
Okay, Mr. King?
I just think actions speak louder than words here. I mean, the governor supported this. He moved it in a direction that made it more likely that partisan considerations will be taken into account regardless of what the Constitution says.
Mr. Latham.
And I'll just echo, I actually think we do have a pretty good judiciary in Utah. I have been concerned about the bill that's been discussed. I know attorneys I respect. I expressed my opposition to it, and I'm very concerned that it is actually politicizing the courts rather than keeping them the way we've enjoyed, I think, for several good decades.
We have about 1 minute until final comments, so I'm going to ask you a question, and it's just two words, maybe one sentence. In a word or two, what makes Utah great? Mr. King.
Freedom, agency of our people to live their lives free of government interference.
Okay. Mr. Latham.
I would also add that I think our free agency is what makes us punch above our weight.
This is the easiest question you've asked on that, Jason. What makes Utah great? Her people.
Okay, it looks like we have time for one more thing here. The most pressing, this is no word, the most pressing issue facing the state of Utah today. Mr. Cox.
The price of housing and homelessness.
Mm-hmm. Mr. King.
We've talked about housing. It's something we haven't talked about, the Great Salt Lake. If the Great Salt Lake doesn't get healthy, if it dries up, nobody is going to want to live in or visit Utah.
Mr. Latham.
It's politicians not listening to the voters, and that's the top-ranked issue on the Utah Priorities 2024 survey. Proportional ranked choice voting can fix that, and I support that.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your responses today. As we have now reached the end of the debate. A random drawing held earlier determined that the first closing statement would go to Mr. Cox.
Well, thank you so much. And again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. And I want to thank my colleagues here on stage for this debate. I hope it was better than the one last night. I hope you actually learned something about who we are and what we believe in. I had an opportunity today to meet with the centenarians in our state. Those are people who have turned 100 years or older. And there were 50 of them, 150, but 50 of them were there today. And I have to tell you, there's nothing better that I get to do. I became so optimistic and hopeful about our state and our country by talking to them. They've seen some things in the last 100 years, and they were optimistic and hopeful. We live in the best state in the nation. That's not just the governor telling you that. U.S. News and World Report looked at 70 different categories, over 1,000 different data points. For the second year in a row, we were named the best state in the nation. I am so proud of who we are and our people. And you have a real choice. You have a choice to keep Utah values, the things that have made us the best state in the nation, given us an opportunity. I believe, again, the conservative values that we hold dear are exactly what every state in this nation needs and this entire country needs to make our country a better place.
Mr. King.
It's an honor to have been with you tonight. 62% of Utahns feel we're headed in the wrong direction. And we know why. It's because the gap between the problems, the enormity of the problems that we face, and the smallness of our politics has only increased. We can do so much better than we have. If you are frustrated with politics, if you feel that elected officials don't listen to you, if you were quietly hoping that Donald Trump wouldn't be the nominee, if you had the courage to vote for Nikki Haley, you're not alone. And we have a place for you. We have an opportunity to build a future where we trust families and where we can give everyone a fair chance to get ahead, and where we do hard things, no matter how difficult or uncertain. My name's Brian King. I'm running to be your next governor. Please join us for the better.
Mr. Latham.
Utahns don't want 4 more years of being bullied and gaslighted. Last year, Argentinians elected a libertarian president. This year, their people and their economy are flourishing. Their plans leave us with a state government that grows more extractive, more repressive, more intrusive, and more abusive. If you trust in your ability to make decisions rather than have a king or a bureaucrat make them for you, please join us in what Patrick Henry called this holy cause. Our prosperity occurs through liberty. Please speak that truth with your vote. My name is Rob Latham. I'm on your ballot. You don't need to write me in. You can learn more about my campaign at freeutahns.org. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the comments and answers to the question this evening. Thank you for watching this evening as well. And for you, gentlemen on stage, we appreciate your dedication to public service. Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. Contact your county clerk if you have any questions about making your vote count in this election. We greatly appreciate Salt Lake Community College for donating the beautiful and historic Grand Theater for this debate. We're also grateful for the Larry H. and Gail Miller Family Foundation, Zions Bank, and the George S. and Dolores Dore Eccles Foundation for their generous support of the Utah Debate Commission. This debate and others from previous years are available online at utahdebatecommission.org. I'm Jason Perry. Thank you for being with us tonight. Stay tuned. Stay in touch.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rob, good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was fun.
See you at the next Alumni Dinner down in St. George, huh?
For sure.
Okay.